Good morning, and welcome to your sermon for Sunday, December the 13th, 2020. We have been looking into the character of God, and we've been looking into the character of God by some of the characters that we see in the Old Testament, and by examining the situations that they went through, and seeing what we can learn from them in regards to the character of God. So last week we studied in the book of Daniel, chapters 1 through 6, just looking at how Daniel trusted in the Lord and the faith that he had. And this week we're going to be studying in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2, the character of Hannah, the father of Samuel. Before we look at our passage today, I have a question for you. Are you tired? Tired of being cooped up? Tired of not being able to do some of the things that you want to do? Tired of being careful to make sure and clean up every time you touch something? I'm tired of having to wear a mask, and tired of not being able to have social activities, tired of using hand sanitizer everywhere you go, and tired of having so many rules and regulations, and tired of wondering when things are going to go back to normal, or just maybe even physically just being tired. COVID fatigue is a real thing that they say, that many people are suffering from it. And if you've been feeling this way, I want you to consider the character of Hannah in the Bible, and maybe that she might have something to teach us in regards to this, and maybe how we might deal with this if we are suffering from this. I'm going to be reading in 1 Samuel chapter 1, and I will start in verse 1. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. And because the Lord had closed her womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Elkanah, her husband, would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? Once when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. In bitterness of soul, Hannah wept much and prayed to the Lord. And she made a vow, saying, O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and said to her, How long will you keep on getting drunk? Get rid of your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah lay with Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. What we see in Hannah, first of all, is really her trust in the Lord. And even in the midst of some very difficult circumstances for her, one was her barrenness. She was not able to have children. She's loved by her husband. It's not that she isn't loved, but for her to not have children, it means so much to her. And it pained her, as it does even many today who are not able to have children. Maybe this has happened to you, or you know of someone who has suffered this hurt where they have not been able to have children. It is a very painful thing to have to deal with. And it hurt her so much that at the celebration times when she saw the family of Peninnah, all the sons and daughters that she had, it hurt her so much that she would cry and she would not eat and take part in that celebration. She just couldn't do it. And this happened over a period of years, year after year as they would go. But Hannah trusts God in her barrenness, but even in her criticism. Peninnah levels at her and is her rival. Peninnah was very cruel to Hannah and was antagonizing her. And I ask the question in this is, how much meaner can you get to someone who really wants to have children and can't, and you're provoking her and irritating her on purpose? But how I see Hannah react to this is in a very godly way. She takes her pain to the Lord. Instead of taking it out on Peninnah or lamenting over that kind of a pain that someone is torturing her, she takes her pain to the Lord instead. In the Old Testament, we see this story could have gone much differently. Hannah could have dealt with this in a much different way. We see in the Old Testament that Sarah mistreated Hagar, and Abraham ended up sending her away just so that they wouldn't have that rift or that. But anyways, there was a different way of dealing with it that could have happened, but that's not how Hannah deals with it in this situation. She doesn't bring this rival to an end. She doesn't deal with it herself. She trusts in the Lord. Even when she's being criticized, she takes this criticism to the Lord. And she prays. She prays to the Lord. She knows that this is a bigger problem than she is able to deal with. She knows she can't fix it. She has wanted to have children and is not able to, but she knows and understands that God is able to deal with it. Her prayer is very simple in this. This is what she says: "Remember your servant, hear my misery, and give me a son." This is what she asks of the Lord, and she trusts in the Lord to be able to do this. We see Hannah's faithfulness. I'm going to continue reading in verse 21 of chapter 1. When the man Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." "Do what seems best to you," Elkanah, her husband, told her. "Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When they had slaughtered the bull, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "As surely as you live, my lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there. Hannah's faithfulness to me is an amazing example following through on what you said you were going to do. She makes a vow. And the interesting thing about this vow is this is not something that she was required to make, or that it wasn't something that everybody else was doing and she just jumped on the bandwagon. This is a voluntary vow, not part of worship, just something that she chose to do. If you think about it, how many times have we asked God for something, not promising him something in return? She could have asked God to grant her a son without promising anything in return. But she makes a vow. And she promises a difficult thing. To give up your boy? How many of you could have a son? Or how many of you ladies could bear a child and then give up your son at such an early age? And I'm not talking about when they get a little bit older and they're misbehaving and maybe you want to give them away for a little while. I'm talking about sending your son away at a very young age to be raised in somebody else's home. Hannah is not spiteful towards Peninnah. Not that we see in how she prays and how she talks. When Eli challenges her about being drunk, she doesn't appeal to Eli for a pity party and telling her how terrible her life is in how this rival is provoking her or how she has been wronged in this. She doesn't go through a big story. She just says, I'm not a wicked woman. I'm pouring out my heart to the Lord. And Eli does answer her, but he thinks that she's drunk at first. She's praying and her lips are moving, but no sound is coming out. And we can understand here easily that God is not looking at the outward appearance of how she looks, because she must have looked very strange, and maybe not how eloquent her prayer is, of saying all the right words in the right order and making it sound nice, but she's pouring out her soul to the Lord. And she's in obvious pain and anguish. And Eli, after he realizes that she is not drunk, he says, may the Lord grant your request. And after Eli says this, she seems to cheer up immediately. She eats and she's not sad anymore. She doesn't go around downcast. And as far as we know, she didn't tell Eli what she had asked the Lord for. And yet we see that she has hope and trusts in God to take care of her and to grant her request. God does grant her request, and she bears a son, whom she names Samuel, because I asked the Lord for him. And after she has her son, she fulfills her vow. She is faithful in fulfilling her vow. I wonder how many today, after promising this very thing to God, would follow through on their promise. She waits until the child is finished breastfeeding, till he is weaned, then takes him to live with Eli and serve all of the days of his life. It is important to her, in the character that she has, both to her and to her husband, that this vow to the Lord is kept. They truly honor and fear the Lord. And the last thing we see is the strength of Hannah. And in chapter 2, we have a passage of scripture that is her prayer to the Lord after he has granted her request. And I'm just going to read that right now, verses 1 through 11. Then Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry hunger no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and rises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. Upon them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked will be silenced in darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be shattered. He will thunder against them from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli, the priest. God is her strength. And that is exactly the theme of this whole prayer, that God is her strength. In this prayer, she's full of thanksgiving for what the Lord has done. We don't see any regret of her mentioning any regret about having to give up her son. She has joy that the Lord has acted and delivered her. She's not delighting in the defeat of her rival, but that the Lord has delivered her. And those are definitely two different things. Do we get more delight out of winning or getting our way? Or do we delight more in the fact that we can see that our strength is that of the Lord acting in our life? God is her strength here, and she knows. She said, there is no one else like God. He alone is holy. He is the standard, and there is none that is like him. She said that God is my rock. And in this, I think she's talking about how steady and firm he is. When all around, everything she saw was it was miserable for her. She understood in that time that he is our rock and that he is our deliverer. All those who think that they have the strength do not truly have it if they do not have God. This is her realization in her prayer. She knows that the Lord is in control. He brings poverty and wealth, death and life. He brings down and raises up. He seats the poor with princes. Do we really believe these things? Do we believe that God is in control? That God acts in our life, not just the world in general, but in our life? Or do we act as if it's up to us? If we want things to change or to happen in our life, that it's up to us without God's help or intervention. In looking at the character of Hannah, we see a woman who was devoted to the Lord, who had a faith that lived in action, in how she spoke, in how she followed through on what she spoke, and how she trusted the Lord in her deepest, most terrible, difficult times in her life. Well, I ask you this morning, in asking, does this help us in even dealing with COVID fatigue today? Well, I ask you some questions. Do you have wounds? Do you have wounds that go deep, deep down, even to the level of your soul? Even with the most painful things in our life, we can trust the Lord to hear our prayer and to answer. I will warn you that it may even take years, like it did for Hannah. But we must be continual in prayer, believing that he hears us. Hannah was a woman of faith, one who truly trusted in the Lord through all of her pain. She was a woman of godly character, in keeping her word even when it must have been incredibly difficult. And her word meant something to her. When she said it, she was faithful to do what she said she would. I wonder if anyone ever asked her where her boy was. I'm sure they must have. And her answer probably had to do with fulfilling the vow that she kept. Hannah, by keeping her promise, gave glory to the Lord. When we keep our word, we also give glory to God. We show the character of God by being faithful to do what we say we will do. And in all of this, knowing that the Lord is our strength. There is nothing in this life that he does not have control over. And that is the way that we must live, as if he is in control of everything. Above all, we must understand that when we are strong, it is because the Lord is our strength. I know that many of you are run down and missing things that you would normally do. But I would encourage you in this. We've only been dealing with this pandemic for 9 or 10 months. It hasn't even been a year yet. Hannah, in her pain, endured for years, and she kept on praying. May we continue to pray and to hope in the Lord, and let us only stay true to him as our strength. And may we give honor and glory to him as we trust in him to keep us until that day where he comes back and he takes us home to be with him. That is the God that we live and serve. In all of our weakness, in all of our trouble, in all of our pain, in all of our frustration, God is there, and he is our strength.